All right, so I've been having truck drivers come into the comment section, and what they'll tell me is, Brandon, you need to understand more about the cost to operate a truck, or you need to understand more about what truck drivers go through when we're out here on the road. So you can consider that when you decide what your costs are to move a load from point A to point B, what you're gonna go to the shipper at. And I hear you, but with all due respect, none of those things am I concerned about. All of those are irrelevant to me. I'm not at all thinking about how much it costs you to operate your truck, because I'm not paying those costs, right? And when it comes down to it, what I'm concerned about is supply and demand. How much demand is it for your truck? If the demand is high for your truck, then guess what? I'm gonna pay a bigger cost to use your truck. If the demand is low for your truck, I am going to pay a lesser cost to use your truck. That's how it works. That's what this world is based on. Business is based on the freight brokerage business, the trucking business, supply and demand. It doesn't have anything to do with me being concerned about what your cost to operate are or what you go through in the truck. I think that's important for you to understand. And then if you look at that and you decide that it's not worth my time to be in the truck because, you know, after I've done my research, I can see that lanes are not paying enough for me to go out and purchase a truck and assume all of the costs that come with the truck, right? So that's some work that you need to put in ahead of time to decide whether or not the opportunity is for you. But to think that I am going to, after you have come into the business, I am going to, you know, go in and look in and say, okay, well, let me figure out what the cost for this carrier to operate his truck is. Nah, I don't care about that. I would have to go in with every carrier that I work with, every owner operator that I work with, and figure that out. And that just doesn't pass the common sense test. I have no concern at all about what the costs are or anything about what the truck driver is going through. Now, of course, that's a fellow brother, that's a fellow man or a fellow woman out there in a truck. So I'm hoping that they have made the right decision for themselves. But I am not scrutinizing their decision. I'm not going in and trying to say, let me see how I can make things better, how I can increase price because I know this truck driver pays more for insurance. No, I don't try to figure anything at all about those types of things. That is not my concern, not in the least, right? So I think it is a little bit way out there to think that a freight broker will take those things into consideration because they are irrelevant to the broker. Now, when it boils down to it, I think that when you start looking at pricing, since it is such a big problem for freight brokers and truck drivers, that's the problem usually that truck drivers have with freight brokers is pricing, right? So if you look out there and you see that you're not satisfied with pricing, don't accept that price, right? But here's what you have to understand. If you don't move the load at a certain price, there's a lot of truck drivers out there. And see, that's the biggest part. How I look at it is there are so many trucks available, prices, especially right now, are going to plummet. You know, when you really look at it, you have to understand that there are seasons for the trucking business. Sometimes things are doing really, really well, and then sometimes they're not doing so well as far as the prices are concerned. Let's look at last year. Rates were through the roof last year, right? This year, it's a different story. You have boom periods, and then you have bust periods. And during the boom, when everything is going great, guess what happens? More people come into the trucking industry. So that further lessens the value of your truck, right? Because you have so many people, so many trucks coming into the space. So when you start looking at pricing and you start blaming freight brokers for pricing, I think you have to look a little bit deeper than that. Yeah, it's easy to blame it on the freight broker. That's the easy thing to do. But when it really boils down to it, I think that you really need to look at the pricing structure and how it works. I think you need to look at the overall landscape and how it works. So instead of saying the truck driver needs to ride with you, you probably need to ride with the trucking industry to figure out how this thing works before you decide to come into it. And then if you look at it and you say, man, this is not worth my time, when I look at it before you come into it. Now, I'm not talking about when you come into it, when you done bought a $100,000 truck, and then you start looking at it and saying it's not worth your time. No, I'm talking about before you do that. Do your due diligence on the industry. If you're deciding to say, hey, I'm going to go into a specific type of freight, then you probably should have a good idea about lanes, how those lanes work. And not just 1 year, take a look at a number of years, because 1 year could give you a faulty perception that lanes cost more than they cost. And I know what happens when you sit down and you start talking with people who are already in the trucking industry. They talk about how much money they make and they inflate those numbers. When you really look at it, how many truck drivers do you know that make $150,000 net pay? Do you know make that type of money? I'm not talking about, oh, I made $4,000 on this load and it was only 700 miles, right? People say that type of stuff, right? But when it really boils down to it, when you really start to look at it, if you could look behind the curtain, you'll realize these guys are not making that kind of money, not in mass numbers. Now, yes, you have some guys that are killing it, right? You have some truck drivers that are killing it out there because they know how to manage a trucking business. They know how it works. And so many people come into this space and they have no idea how the truck driving industry works, the truck driving business, right? So it's not about the truck driver figuring out or learning more about what you do. It's about you learning more about what you do. You understanding how it works. You understanding the financial piece and whether or not it's a good fit for you. So don't give that responsibility to the freight broker. Give that responsibility to yourself. If you do that, I personally think it will put you in a much better position. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Certainly hope this information has been helpful. If you want to learn more about the freight broker business, I'll leave a free video in the description box. It's my 5-video series, or a free link in the description box, I should say. It's my 5-video series and it's titled How the Load Movement Process Works. It allows for you to see me in the office in action, talking to carriers, talking to shippers, to give you a better understanding of how this business works before you come into it. And then if you want to know how we go out and get shippers, those people who we are working with that give us the freight in order to make the money, then I'll leave you a free video right here showing you how we get those shippers to work with us. So until the next time, as always, let's get all the way to the top of the mountain, my people, because the bottom, as you already know, it's crowded. So why hang out there? See you at the very top, because the bottom is much too crowded.